right, so next up I'm going to invite Kevin. There you are, back there. Kevin actually came to one of our Biologists at the Design Table trainings 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, I'm not sure when it was. And I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we first heard the term ecological performance standards from you. And Kevin's a builder and a designer, and he was showing us a picture. I still have it imprinted in my mind so this is a builder, and he was showing us how they had to dig a trench and they carefully moved the roots. Man, this was a long time ago, and did the work, put the pipes or whatever it was, and then carefully laid the roots back down of the tree, which was just so beautiful and inspiring. And so Kevin's been thinking about and doing this for a long time, and wrote a master's thesis on it, I understand. So we're going to hear a little bit about it.
Thanks, Dana. Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever we are. So I'd like to call myself a biologist who became a builder. I'm from the northern forest. We have 6,756 heating degree days. On average, we get 39 to 41 inches of rainfall and 120 inches of snow. Where I live is unique in that the watershed where I live actually flows both north and south. To the south, it goes into the Susquehanna, where it empties into the Chesapeake Bay, and finally, after 80 years, eelgrasses have finally returned. To the north, it goes into Onondaga Lake, which was one of the most polluted lakes in the nation. And there it goes into St. Lawrence, and then it opens up into the ocean. So that's my place. That's where I'm from. I live right next to the Onondaga Haudenosaunee Nation, and I take a lot of my tools from them, but I would like to introduce my two tools right here. These are the tools that inform my decision-making processes. On the left, we have the golden crown kinglet. If I'd like for you guys just to step back in time real quick to when you're in elementary school, and on the playground, you were asked to line up from left to right, smallest to tallest. In my world, the golden crown kinglet is right next to the ruby-throated hummingbird. Whereas the ruby-throated hummingbird decides to travel thousands of miles each year to escape our harsh winters, the golden crown kinglet decides to stay. He lives in the Adirondacks where it can get to minus 40 degrees. So he informs me, better than any other tool I know, of heat and moisture transport through my wall and roof assemblies. He tells me this by over tens of thousands of feathers, how they're aligned and where he's coming from. The photo on the right is where Janine and Dana actually introduced me to. When Janine told me one day, actually she said to me when our first day of training up there in Montana was that she was going to flip my world upside down. And I think I've been in an inversion ever since. So both these are my tools. These are free tools that we've heard about in the last couple of days, but I learned everything from this and how to build a better house. So this I'll give a little bit of detail to, because when this came out, when I saw this first Cape Raworth donut that Janine talks about on the first day, I saw it as the true net zero. To me, it's like what encircles the troposphere as it encircles the globe, right? It's where we step inside this gentle curve that encircles the earth, where everything, all life is. So when I look at this, I think, how can I gracefully create a home that we live in, or a building where we work and learn, place it inside this tiny circle that goes around our globe? Well, once we step out, just a tiny step to the right, it's ecological degradation. Tiny step into the left, into the inside of the circle, it's social deprivation. So how do we do this? Well, probably the best tool we have to do this is you and I. It's us. It's every decision we make each day, no matter what project we're on. When I think about last night when I was having a wine, we make a decision where we have a bottle of wine that's a corkscrew, a true cork, a neoprene stopper, or one of these new twist-offs, right? Well, that decision of what bottle of wine we have that night actually has an impact on the Iberian eagle, the Iberian leopard, I'm saying that right, and 5 other species. So the choice of wine can actually have an impact on 5 different endangered species. So it's you and I that really have to be inside the circle.
Or should we choose?
Yeah. So I bring this up because this is where I got my baseline from. In the Half Earth book, you know, we always look for a baseline. It's pre-European development for the EPS. You know, what's the true reference ecosystem? And actually, in chapter 19, E.O. Wilson states pretty emphatically that our baseline has to go back to the species level. We have to go into the fossils and find out before human intrusion actually had an impact. And that's the baseline we need to use for ecological performance standards. And that's a difficult place to get to, because this is what our baseline is in the building world, right? These are the I codes, the International Residential Code, the International Building Code. This is what tells us how to build today. Well, in 2006, EPA, for some unknown reason, went from 32 climate zones down to 8. They defined climate zones as zip codes across county lines, and this is where we need to build from, right? So I remember being out in Greenville with Scott quite a few years ago in San Francisco, and I actually visited, I was the last person to sign up for a wine tour, so we're getting a common pattern here with me, but so I got picked up by an old beat up VW bus, and by the time I went over to San Francisco Bridge, he actually had an 8-track, I think this, put in red wine. I'm thinking this is going to be pretty bad. There were 2 Canadians in the back that were drunk before we got over the bridge. Middle seats was someone from Wisconsin, another person from Minnesota, so they were football players, so they were beating each other to death. And the first place we pulled up to was an old beaten up farm, which was a vineyard. It used to be a dairy farm, right? And a young lady came out, she'd run down the steps with some short pants on, and I had to hold the Canadians back. And I'm thinking, oh, this is a bad tour, right? But the first thing she said to me, the very first thing she said, on our 2.5-acre vineyard, as we gently go up and over the hillside, there are 32 climate zones. And that turned me upside down. So rather than look at my wall assemblies and roofs and window placement on the 4 cardinal directions that were taught in school, now I'm starting to look at them vertically, and we can build them different in a sense. So this is the human element. These are what is really our tools. So historically, if you look at this story real quick, I'll go through this one. This is the traditional ecological knowledge that Robin Kimmerer is so fond of saying. And this is actually the story of Peruvian farmers that for the past 400 years go up on the winter solstice and look far off into the space until they see the Pleiades constellation of Taurus, right? And they base their decision, their livelihood, on what of the 29 species of potatoes they plant that year and when they plant, based on the brightness or the dimness of the Pleiades, the 7 sisters, right? So the scientists came up and said, well, how can they be doing this so accurately over 400 years? So for 5 years they studied this and found out that for 400 years they've actually been looking at El Nino. And we've only known this for 20 years now. So this is what ecological knowledge is about, the tradition. So it's a case study. We asked for a case study, so the biologists out of that college, they came and helped me, and we created the ecological performance standards. Those were our tools. We used the National Heritage Program, we used some of the DEC stuff, and we went through and actually did transects on sites. So if this is the before and after, the top right, so we have our map, we have our locations. So I think I'm doing things right here. We go into the archives of the Historical Society and in some of the old architectural firms in our area, and we dig up old maps, street maps. We get vegetative maps from the late 17th century and overlay them on. So we actually can understand going through some of the natural history. We go back in the archives where people are talking about this and basically in about, the early 1800s. So we locate it, we describe it, we understand what lived there before we got there. This is our reference habitat. We preserve the memory of the system. This is one of the biologists, Jessica Bone. We're actually doing seed bank studies and we're growing the seeds. If we don't know what the seeds are, we grow them up in the Arboretum, up in the ESF campus. Here's a picture of some of what we do when we can't bend the root systems out of there. We actually cut them and apply a mycorrhiza ointment to them. We understand what the historical college is. We have a species list to go with. We understand that the fauna is just as important as the flora of the area, and what our impact truly is. We developed an algorithm, and the algorithm is defined by some of the tools we have today that we are actually starting to use, but back then we had to do most of this all by hand, right? And here's our reference, what I refer to as ecological metabolism. So we know what the site produced, the reference site for European intrusion, right? And now we go to build. Here are just some of the tools. I'll skip by the ones that I wish we had back then. Here's our site. We decided to actually deconstruct. This is one of the first deconstruction projects in the history of the city of Syracuse. We actually saved over, I believe it was 86% of the site. We used distractive use to the neighbors. We took the wood from the site, we repurposed it, and put it right back in the house that was built on site. We actually went to the Hubbard Brook Foundation, which was the largest study ever in the history of the world of following a raindrop in our area in the northern forest. And we studied that and came up with these metrics. How do we meet these metrics? Well, we define them a little bit further based on the canopy, the hemlock swamp that we were in, and we start to actually dive down into it. So one of the things that's unique about our projects, we actually flip, and we've heard that word a few times here as well, the SWIP. So instead of putting this stuff after, we put it in before. So it's not just the erosion and sedimentation control, it's the stuff that's cleaning life and preserving life for us before we start our construction. Here's one of our ecological restorers that we put in. This is the Jonathan Todd Ecological Restorer. We're actually putting a restorer across the water as it comes onto our site. And we ended up taking down a 250-year-old barn, and it was made out of old-growth cypress, and making that part of the restorer. So we're walking past, these plants are actually growing in the water, purifying the water and taking care of the sedimentation for us. We developed a model of water efficiency. This model here is actually for the high-scoring LEED project in the world in 2012, which was also the largest building in the world at that time. Biophilia, so if we know where the raindrop's going to fall and how to do it, this is actually looking out into the bedroom windows. We're looking at a living roof system that's actually starting to teach water how to walk again, slowing it down so we can actually manage it on site. Gray water systems, we're harvesting everything and gray water in the house, putting in a tank, and letting that mix it with the gray water system, we actually can get to the deep world water. But this is where we start to fall down, and all of you out there pick this up, right? This is the human side, where we're allowed to fall down because we know you guys are behind us to pick us up. So with that, we embed all our knowledge in a QR code that is actually limitless in the information we have. And then we track our homes and we actually create a phenology of the built environment and what direction we're moving forward to. So we have a baseline to study where our houses are and where we're ending up, and if we're actually are making true measures of ecological performance standards. Thank you.
What I love is this whole, like, well, if it's not there, I'm just going to figure it out anyhow. And I think Kevin's a really great example of that. And imagine, you know, if, of course, if every architect, every builder was thinking like Kevin, we'd all be done, right? We'd have it all figured out. But imagine what we could do collectively in all of our different spaces and what we bring to the table to grow more builders like that, and to make that more possible so that Kevin can spend more time building and less time figuring out all the pieces to make that possible. So thank you for your good work in that realm.
Can I say something? Mm-hmm. I got to tell a Kevin story. Kevin and Josh, his son, and that they are a power couple. They really are. You know, at the front of the book, there's a Václav Havel. My book, there's a Václav Havel quote. And it starts, the book starts with, we must draw our standards from the natural world. And admit that, you know, the wonders there exceed all our confidence, essentially. And I don't know, I was talking in Syracuse or something. Kevin and Josh picked me up. We sat in a banquet. There was a glass with a little bit of bourbon in it. I don't even know where we were. It's like a diner, but we had bourbon or something. And I have been thinking, like, how do we do this? How do we do this? Standards from the natural world. And he told me these stories. And he said, I'm already doing this. I'm a builder. You know, and for me, in my part of the world, that's like the people who get stuff done, guys with the pickup trucks. I have huge respect for them. He's got to actually build the stuff. And that gave me so much courage to think it could be done. Because if he was already taking the time, you just saw a tiny bit of that he was measuring himself against his place and trying to become part of that cycle. You know, and so thank you, Kevin. That was amazing. I can't even remember the place. All I remember are cute faces and going,
And the
wow.
burger. And the burger.
He's doing it. In his quiet way. He's doing it.
Well, I think Janine brings up. So I think Janine, you brought up a very good thread that Chris and Kevin and Chip, who we're going to hear next, hold in common, which is courage. And that sort of belief and that vision that I'm just going to make it happen. Chris is working on these development scales. He's really changing it. Kevin's building houses. And Chip's like doing massive hectare projects. Chip is an incredible champion for this work. One of the first that Janine and I encountered when he was at HOK. He's now at Form Studios. And just 100% convinced that this is the way it has to be. And he goes in and talks to the developers and the decision makers and says, we're going to do this. And they go, okay, whatever you say, which is really cool. So we've been grateful to be along for the ride, and we wanted him to share some of his stories.